Good day everyone, my name is Leona Divimar Sissohor from CA200 Section C. CA200 are institutional corrections. In these slides, I will tackle about Chapter 1 and its 7 topics. Topic 1. A global view on prison administration. Prison administration involves security and discipline. It also involves enforcement of rules and regulations in the management of prison system. In prison administration, this helps prisoner and the management in their security. Prison System 4. Prisons have 4 major purposes. First is retribution, second, incapacitation, third, deterrence, and last, rehabilitation. Retribution is a punishment for crimes against society, like what you've seen in the picture. Incapacitation, restriction of an individual's freedoms and liberties that they would have in the society. Deterrence, a preventive effect which actual or threatened. Rehabilitation is a restoring someone to health or normal life through training and therapy after imprisonment, addiction, or illness. Carlson and Garrett 1999 states that prison administration fundamentally involves the application of both leadership and management techniques to correctional institutions. Correctional institutions charged with maintaining the safety and security of both prisoners and the staff within the jurisdictional authority of a federal government. In 2018, the Philippines held the 6th highest prison population out of 21 Asian countries. And in 2019, Philippines' population rested at 108.31 million people, and 215,000 of those people were incarcerated. The Philippines has an incarceration rate of about 200 per 100,000 citizens. There are 933 prisons running in the Philippines. Unfortunately, they are mismanaged and overcrowded. There are 5 important facts about the incarceration system in the Philippines. Severe overcrowding, a situation when a place contains too many people or things. When Rodrigo Duterte won the presidential election in 2016, he promised to end the crime in our country within 6 months. This promise also included the killing of tens of thousands of criminals. Duterte's election led to the infamous war on drugs and eventually overcrowded prisons. Pre-trial detention. It is the process of detaining a person until their trial after they have been arrested and charged with an offense. Pre-trial detainees. According to the World Prison Brief, 75.1% of incarcerations within the Philippines incarceration system are pre-trial. In 2018, 141,422 of 188,278 prisoners were pre-trial detainees. Unfortunately, many people are serving sentences without conviction. Death tolls. The number of people who die in an accident or disaster, war, etc. High death tolls. About 3,200 inmates die annually at the New Bilibid Prison, or NBP, according to Ernesto Tamayo, the hospital medical chief. These deaths are due to overcrowding, dirty living, conditions, and inmate violence. At a 2019 Philippine Senate hearing, Tamayo said that there were uncontrollable outbreaks of pulmonary tuberculosis, lack of nutritional food, and basic health care. Vigilante justice. Action of a single person or group of people who claim to enforce the law lack the legal authority to do so. Duterte's war on drugs escalated during his presidency. Jobless citizens were recruited to kill anyone suspected of dealing, buying, or using drugs. This was one of the few ways for some people to make money. Many homeless and impoverished people joined the vigilante teams. Corruption. Improper and usually unlawful conduct intended to secure a benefit for oneself or another. In August 2018, the public learned a former mayor had been released from prison for good behavior. He was originally charged for rape and homicide in 1993. Similar stories of corruption in the Philippines. Prisons continued to emerge. In September 2018, the public learned that a woman was told her husband's sentence would be shortened if she paid 500,000 pesos. War on Drugs is a global campaign led by the U.S. federal government of drug prohibition, military aid, and military interventions with the aim of reducing the illegal drug trade in the U.S. Next is incarceration. Is a confinement in a jail or prison, the act of imprisoning someone or the state of being imprisoned. A prisoners. A person who legally held in prison as a punishment for crimes they have committed or while awaiting trial. Sentence. Declare the punishment decided for an offender. A conviction is a formal declaration that someone is guilty of a criminal offense made by the verdict of a jury or decision of a judge in a court of law. Detain. Keep someone in official custody, typically for questioning about a crime. Inmates. A person confined to an institution such as a prison or hospital. Vigilante teams. This is a group of volunteers who are not police but who decided on their own to stop crime and punish criminals. Contraband. Goods that are against the law to trade or to be imported or exported. Next is topic 2. Prison antiquity to modernity. So what is prison? Prison is a building in which people are legally held as a punishment for a crime they have committed or while awaiting trial. Antiquity. The ancient past, especially the period before the Middle Ages. Modernity. The quality or state of being or appearing to be modern. The quality of being modern. Notions of crime and punishment are the result of millennia of human advancement. From antiquity to modern times, criminal justice and criminology have evolved due to significant contribution. Here is a brief timeline of some of the most notable contributions. Sumer, 3500 BC. Generally accepted as the first known urban civilization, the ancient land of Sumer is located in modern-day Iraq. Before summer, people live in small agricultural communities. Once summer developed, city-states appeared. This led to the formation of primitive government in order to control the crime that naturally derives from urban life. These governing bodies began to establish the origins of law and order. Primitive government. To quit different things, either the earliest, the original, or the most simple forms of government. Law. The system of rules which a particular country or community recognize as regulating the action of impositions of penalties. Order. A direction issued by a court or a judge requiring a person to do or not to do something. In times of rise of the Romans, 500 BC, the Roman Republic established itself as the first superpower. Law and order was maintained by soldiers who would walk the streets of cities, towns, and villages. The mere presence of the soldiers was a solid deterrent, and it helped keep crime under relative control. Deterrent. It is something that prevents people from doing something by making them afraid of what will happen to them if they for it. Relative control. Control does not function as an absolute but as a relative input. In absolute control, the input is either 100% button the press or neutral button not press. Plato, 428 to 347 before Christ, a student of Socrates and teacher of Aristotle. Plato introduced the concept that people are inherently good. This belief greatly influenced the thoughts on crime and punishment as the centuries progressed. Crime, an action or omission that constitutes an offense that may be prosecuted by the state and is punishable by law. Punishment. It is the infliction or imposition of a penalty as retribution for an offense. Aristotle, 384 to 327 BC. According to him, expanding on the teaching of Plato, Aristotle's view relied heavily on scientific observation. As the tutor to Alexander the Great, Aristotle would impart upon him the significance of science and its impact on decision-making. These teachings had a heavy influence on early forensic sciences and crime scene investigations. So what is forensic science? Known as criminalistics, is the application of science to criminal and civil laws. On the criminal side, during criminal investigation, as governed by the legal standards of admissible evidence and criminal procedure. Crime scene investigations. Use of physical evidence at the scene of the crime and the use of deductive and inductive reasoning to gain knowledge of the events surrounding the crimes. Assassination of Julius Caesar, 44 BC. Many historians believe that the first historical recorded autopsy was conducted upon Julius Caesar. De Materia Medica, 50 to 70 AD, widely considered to be the groundwork for forensic toxicology. De Materia Medica is a publication that categorizes an array of flora. Written by Greek Pedanius Dioscorides, the book discusses both the medical benefits and the poisonous aspect of various plants. Frank Pledge, 1035. After the collapse of the Roman Empire, the Western world was highly destabilized. This led to the families and small communities policing themselves. After hundreds of years of no centralized policing, the English concept of Frank Pledge was introduced. Males over the age of 12 under this concept formed into groups of 10. Their job was to capture and detain members of their own clan who committed a crime. This was all done under the supervision of a constable who was appointed by the crown. So what is constable? Is a high officer of a royal court or noble household, especially in the Middle Age. Summa Theological 1265 to 1274. Exploring the concept of natural law. Saint Thomas Aquinas wrote the Summa Theologica in furtherance of Plato's concept of people's inherent goodness. Aquinas opined that crime was both an affront to God and society, and that criminal behavior damages both the victim and the soul of the criminal. Natural law, a theory in ethics and philosophy that says human beings possess intrinsic values that govern our reasoning and behavior, maintains that these rules of right and wrong are inherent in people and are not created by society or court or judge. Justice of Peace, 14th century. The English crown began appointing justice of the peace to assist constables in their efforts to control crime. These magistrates issued warrants, held arraignment, and tried minor criminal cases. Social contract 1625 to 1762. It is introduced by John Locke. The theory of the social contract discusses the various rules of people and government in maintaining a balanced society. Essentially, the theory holds that people cede the authority to the government in exchange for security and prosperity. At this point in history, theories of crime and punishment shift from theological to secular. Insane asylums 1750. The emergence of insane asylums across Europe led to the study of inmates. People were considered insane for various archaic reasons, and the people who studied them were known as alienists. The work conducted by the alienists laid the foundation for modern psychiatry. Alienist. It is a psychiatrist who assesses the competence of a defendant in a court of law. Adolphe Quetelet, 1827. Using national crime statistic from France, Belgian statistician Adolphe Quetelet determined that there were correlations between demographics and crimes. His studies lead criminologists to understand how a person's age, gender, education, and socioeconomic status could have bearing on their propensity for criminal behavior. Metropolitan Police Service 1829. Established in London, the Metropolitan Police Services became the first full-time, professional, and uniformed police force. Each officer has issued a copy of Sir Robert Peel's and 9 Principles of Policing. 9 Principles of Policing. First, the basic mission for which the police exists is to prevent crime and disorder. Second, the ability of the police to perform their duties independent upon public approval of police actions. Third, police must secure the willing cooperation of the public and voluntary observance of the law to be able to secure and maintain the respect of the public. Fourth is the degree of cooperation of the public that can be secured diminished proportionately to the necessity of the use of physical force. Fifth, Police seek and preserve public favor not by catering to the public opinion, but by constantly demonstrating absolute impartial service to the law. 6 is police use physical force to the extent necessary to secure observance of the law or to restore order only when the exercise of persuasion, advice, and warning is found to be insufficient. Police at all times should maintain a relationship with the public that gives reality to the historic tradition that the police are the public and the public are the police. The police being only members of the public who are paid to give full-time attention to duties which are incumbent on every citizen in the interest of community welfare and existence. 8 is police should always direct their actions strictly towards their functions and never appear to usurp the powers of the judiciary. Last is the test of police efficiency is the absence of crimes and disorder, not the visible evidence of police action in dealing with it. Prison, 1850. The concept of a modern prison first arose in Europe. During the mid-19th century, doctors were given access to the prisoners so that they could conduct studies into criminal behavior. Governments were particularly interested in the doctors' findings, as it allowed them to understand what prompts criminal behavior. As government became stronger, the official demanded empirical evidence so that they were better equipped to control the populace. Kodak, 1888. The Kodak camera by George Eastman was a revolutionary piece of equipment on numerous levels, including its impact on policing. As a result of the easily available Kodak camera, investigators could now memorialize crime scenes. Crime Lab, 1988. The father of forensic Dr. Edmond Locard established the first modern crime lab in Lyon, France. DNA evidence in 1988. For the first time ever, DNA evidence was used in criminal court. As a result of DNA evidence, Tommy Lee was found guilty of rape in a Florida courtroom. Since 1988 have been many significant advancements regarding both the manner in which crimes are investigated, as well as the methods for convicting and punishing the offender. Not only do our modern advancements help convict wrongdoers, but they also assist us in exonerating the wrongly accused. History of prisons. From the birth of modern civilization in 3rd millennia BC, every major ancient civilization used concept of prisons as means to detain and remove personal freedoms of incarcerated people. Prisons were often used as a temporary stopgap before sentencing to death or life slavery. Civilization developed prisons started morphing into correctional facilities that started implementing the concept of rehabilitation and reform of prisoners. 1st millennia BC, located in the areas of mighty ancient civilization of Mesopotamia and Egypt. It is the earliest records of prisons. Prisons were stationed in underground dogyons. Dogyons means a strong underground prison cell where guilty or suspected criminals spent their life either awaiting death sentence or a command to become a slaves. So next is topic 3, the influence of Roman Catholic Church. So, what is Roman Catholic Church? It is the largest Christian church with approximately 1.3 billion baptized Catholics worldwide as of 2019. So what does the Roman Catholic Church believe? Catholics shared with other Christians as a belief in the divinity of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, made man, who came to earth to redeem humanity's sins through his death and resurrection. Catholic bishops' response to crime in the United States is a moral test for the nation and a challenge for the Church. As Catholics, how can we restore a respect for law and life? Our tasks are to restore a sense of civility and responsibility to everyday life, promote crime prevention, genuine rehabilitation. So how can Catholic protect and rebuild communities, confront crime without vengeance, and defend life without taking life? A Catholic approach begins with the recognition that the dignity of the human person applies to both victim and offender. They believe that the trend of more prisons and more executions with too little educations and drug treatment does not truly reflect Christians' values and will not really leave our communities safer. They are convinced that the tradition and our faith offer better alternatives that can hold offenders accountable and challenge to change their lives, reach out to victims, and reject vengeance to restore a sense of community and resist the violence. Does not give up on those who violate these laws because they believe that both victims and offenders are children of God. Their lives and dignity should be protected and respected despite of their very different claims on the society. Punishment must have clear purposes, protecting society and rehabilitating those persons who violates the law. So, Catholic vision of crime and criminal justice can offer some alternatives. It recognizes that root causes and personal choices to encourage models of restorative justice that seek to address crime in terms of the harm done to victims and communities, understanding the need for responsibility on the part of the offender and an opportunity for their rehabilitation. The option of the poor and vulnerable. Principle of Catholic social teaching recognizes that every public policy must be assessed by how it affects the poorest and most vulnerable people in the society. Lack of adequate resources, people suffer discrimination, physical, and sexually emotional abuse. Stepping stones on a path towards crime. Proper nutrition, shelter, healthcare, protection from abuse and neglect. Rule as church is to continually work to address these needs through pastoral care, charity, and advocacy. We are guided by the paradoxical Catholic teaching on crime and punishment. Not tolerate the crime and violence that threatens the lives and dignity of our sisters and brothers. Will not give up on those who have lost their way. Seek both justice and mercy. Working together, believe our faith calls us to protect public safety, promote the common good, and restore community. Catholic ethic of responsibility, rehabilitation, and restoration can become the foundation for the necessary reform of our broken criminal justice system. So what is responsibility? It is having a duty to deal with something or having control over someone. Rehabilitation, to restore the patient's physical, sensory, mental capabilities that were lost. Restoration is the action of returning something to a former owner, place, or condition. Detention of immigrants. Bishops have a long history of supporting the rights of immigrants. Special circumstances of immigrants in detention centers is of particular concern. The Immigration and Naturalization Service o INS uses variety of methods to detain immigrants. Physical, behavioral, and emotional healing happens sooner and with more lasting results if accompanied by spiritual healing. Access to worship and religious formation is not only guaranteed by the Constitution, it is a significant element in rebuilding lives and changing behavior. Our Catholic faith can help us and others to go beyond the current debate and gain a deeper understanding on how to reject crime, help heal its victims, and pursue the common good. Subsidiarity and solidarity, policy foundation and directions. Approaches built on the following foundations. Protecting society from those who threaten life, inflict harm, take property, and destroy the bonds of community. Rejecting simplistic solutions such as three strikes and you're out, and rigid mandatory sentencing. Promoting serious efforts toward crime prevention and poverty reduction, challenging the culture of violence and encouraging a culture of life, offering victims the opportunity to participate more fully in the criminal justice process. 6. Encouraging innovative programs of restorative justice that provide the opportunity for mediation between victims and offenders and offer restitutions for crimes committed. Insisting that punishment has a constructive and rehabilitative purpose, encouraging spiritual healing and renewal for those who commit crime. Making a serious commitment to confront the pervasive rule of addiction and mental illness in crime. 10. Threatening immigrants justly. Last is placing crime in a community context and building on promising alternatives that empower neighborhoods and towns to restore a sense of security. The Church Mission. The challenge of curbing crimes and reshaping the criminal justice system is not just a matter of public policy, but it is also a test of Catholic commitment. In the face of so much violence and crime, our faith calls the Church to responsibility and action. First, teach right from wrong, respect for life and the law, forgiveness and mercy. Second, stand with victims and their families. Third, reach out the offenders and their families, advocate for more treatment, and provide for the pastoral needs of all involved. Fourth, build community. Fifth, advocate policy that help reduce violence, protect the innocent, involve the victims, and offer real alternatives to crime. 6. Organize diocesan and state consultation. 7. Work for new approaches. Next is topic 4. Pope John Paul II, or the pro-life Pope. So, who is Pope John Paul II? The head of the Catholic Church and sovereign of the Vatican City state from 1978 until his death in 2005. He was elected Pope by the Second Papal Conclave of 1978, which was called after John Paul I, who had been elected in August to succeed Pope Paul VI. Died after 33 days, born 18 May 1920 in Wadowice, Poland. What did Pope John Paul did? Was remembered for his successful efforts to end communism, as well as for building bridges with people of other faiths and issuing the Catholic Church's first apology for its actions during World War II. According to Pope John Paul II, July 9, 2000, we are still a long way from the time when our conscience can be certain of having done everything possible to prevent crime and to control it effectively so that it no longer does harm, and at the same time, to offer to those who commit crimes as a way of redeeming themselves and making a positive return to society. If all those in some way involved in the problem tried to develop this line of thoughts, perhaps humanity as a whole could take a great step forward in creating a more serene and peaceful society. Pope John Paul II discusses death penalty, stating that it is a form of murder and is therefore unholy and unlawful. Euthanasia as a grave violation of the law of God. This is like a murder and it is a form of deliberate killing. Condemnation of abortion because it is the direct killing of a human. Papal teaching: the inviolability of the person, which is a reflection of the absolute inviolability of God, find its primary and fundamental expressions in the inviolability of human life. A society lacks solid foundations when, on the one hand, and it asserts values as the dignity of a person, justice, and peace. Tolerating a variety of ways in which human life is devalued and violated, especially where it is weak and marginalized. Pope John Paul II said that only respect for life can be the foundation and guarantee of the most precious and essential goods of society, such as democracy and peace. Evangelium Vitae, the Gospel of Life. It is a warning and a plea to the people of the United States and underdeveloped nations. The warning is that ours fast becoming a culture of death. This plea is for us to join together in building a new culture of life. Declares that even now we are in the midst of an enormous and dramatic clash between the culture of life and the culture of death. Stake in this struggle is respect for the basic human dignity of the weakest and vulnerable members of the human family, the unborn, the frail, the elderly, the poor, and the infirm. The character of society is shaped in a decisive way by its treatment to those who need a care and protection. The resolution of this struggle will determine what kind of people we are. According to Pope, in this culture of life, by contrast, freedom is never a license to kill or oppress. Freedom is ordered to goodness, to justice, and to human solidarity. Pope says that cultural struggle generally has particular force and salience when it comes to the abortion license. It has taken more than 30 million innocent lives in our country alone since 1973. Holy Father teaches that our responsibilities to the unborn and other victims of the culture of death go beyond merely personal obligation to refrain from seeking, performing, or abetting the procurement of abortion. All of us have the responsibility to unconditionally pro-life. Public officials are bound to act in conformity with the great truth of our Declaration of Independence that all human beings are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, including, in the very first place, the right to life. Next is topic 5. Walnut Street Jail. So what is Walnut Street Jail? It is a city jail and penitentiary house in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania from 1773 to 1838. It is the first prisoners were admitted in 1776. It is also the largest and most commodious within the Commonwealth. It was built to use individual cells and work detains. What is penitentiary? Came from the Pennsylvania Quakers' belief in penitence and self-examination as a means to salvation. Was made a new and permanent form of combating crime through the practice of solitary confinement. So what is solitary confinement? The isolation of a prisoners in a separate cell as a punishment. In 1790s, the the jail and the Pennsylvania system of solitary confinement were greatly admired throughout the world. In 1880, mounting disciplinary problems caused by overcrowded facilities brought an end to the jail's finest years. Importance of Walnut Jail. Walnut Street Prisons was a pioneering effort in prison reform, originally built as a conventional jail just before the American Revolution. Robert Smith is an architect who designed the Walnut Street Jail, a typically U-shaped building. Quakers of Philadelphia, who came up with the concept of penitentiary. Penitentiary is a place where prisoners could reflect on their crime and become truly sorry for what they had done. Quakers saw this solitary confinement not a punishment, but as a time for reflection and remorse. Believed that through reflection and repentance, inmates would give up crime and leave prison rehabilitated. It is a form that Philadelphia Society for Alleviating the Miseries of Public Prisons. Goal was made clear in its name and encouraged prison reform. In 1790, when the Walnut Street Jail became the first state penitentiary in the country, Penitentiary House, the main addition to the Walnut Street complex was cell block, built in the courtyard of the existing structure. It included a series of small cells designed to hold individual prisoners. The cells and the corridors connecting them were designed to prevent prisoners from communicating with each other. The cells had 9-foot high ceiling and grated to prevent prisoners from looking into the street. Each cell had mattress, water tap, and privacy pipe. The only person they saw was the guard, and then only briefly once a day. The reason why the inmates were not put to work. In Walnut, the reason why the labor said penitentiary proponents would preoccupy the inmates and keep them from reflecting on their crimes. Pennsylvania system. Walnut Street Prison became in part the model, prison design and philosophy. In 1821, other prisons built on the Pennsylvania model included a prison in Pittsburgh. A prison was opened in the small upstate New York town of Newport. That prison relied on individual cell block architecture, required inmates to work 10 hours per day, 6 days per week. Number of prison reforms believed that making the inmates work in an atmosphere free of corruption or criminal behavior, they would build new sets of values. In 1836, the concept of solitary confinement and repentance were key components of prison life at this institution. Prisons did not introduce labor to the inmates. Newbern System in 1826. The opening of Sing Sing Prison on the banks of the Hudson River. Newbern System worked better at rehabilitating prisoners than the Pennsylvania system. Walnut Street became overcrowded and dirty, and there was no sign that isolated prisoners were being rehabilitated through solitude. In 1830s, the prison had outlived its usefulness. In 1790, Philadelphia's Walnut Street Jail was expanded and alleviated overcrowding. Topic 6. King Henry VIII. Who is King Henry VIII? He is the King of England, ruled England for 30 years, presiding over sweeping changes that brought his nation into Protestant Reformation. Married a series of 6 wives in his search for political alliance, marital bliss and health male fear, took the throne at the age of 17. Active king, keeping a festive court, hunting, toasting, writing, and playing music. In 1515, Bridewell Prison was the first house of correction in England, originally built as a royal palace for Henry VIII Bridewell. It is established to be multi-purpose with a keeper's side, serving as a correctional facility and a steward side for housing orphans. It is held those who committed minor crimes, usually vice, vagrancy, or prostitution. A place of incarceration, it was meant to be a place to punish and correct inmates through whippings and hard labor, and most offenders were released within 2 weeks of their arrival. Changed during the prison of reform era, with the open prison system, prisoners being allowed to interact and positions allowed in and out. So what is orphanage? It aims to provide a home for deserving children, offer basic education and training in some skill. The program was smaller than the prison, and it was reduced with the decline of apprenticeships in the late 70s. Prison reformers' concerns about inmates corrupting the students. Court of Governors and various committees, who jointly ran Bridewell with Bethlehem Hospital, managed the residents and the finances of the institution. Bridewell's operation was particularly comprehensive health system, served as both an orphanage and a prison. People who were wanted to care for children, both physician and a surgeon attended to the inmates and orphans. Over 300 years of operation, Bridewell became the basis for future orphanage workhouses and prisons. Bridewell became synonymous with large prison. Bridewell as the first house of correction set important precedents for inmate standards and system of governance and correctional institution for the rest of the country and the world. Henry VIII's first marriage to Catherine of Aragon annulled. Henry's disagreement with Pope Clement VII about such an annulment led him initiate the English Reformation, separating the Church of England from papal authority, appointed himself supreme head of the Church of England, and dissolved convents and monasteries. He has excommunicated, known as the father of Royal Navy, as he invested heavily in the Navy. His contemporaries considered him an attractive, educated, and accomplished king, one of the most charismatic rulers to set on the English throne. His reign has been described as the most important in English history. He was an author and a composer. As he aged, he became severely overweight and his health suffered, frequently characterized in his later life as a lustful, egotistical, paranoid, and tyrannical monarch. Last is topic 7. King Edward VII. King Edward VI. A jewel of King Henry VIII. Who is King Edward VI? He was the King of England and Ireland from 28th of January 1547 until his death in 1553. And at the age of 9, he was crowned on February 20. He was the son of Henry VIII and Jane Seymour, England's first monarch to be raised as a Protestant. During his reign, the realm was governed by a regency council because he never reached the maturity. Reign was marked by economic problems and social unrest that in 1549 erupted into riot and rebellion. War with Scotland. First successful, indeed, with military withdrawal from Scotland and from Scotland and Boulogne-sur-Mer in exchange for peace. That's a, the transformation of the Church of England into a recognizable Protestant body took great interest in religious matters. Edward's reign. Protestantism was established for the first time in England with reforms that included the abolition of clerical celibacy and the Mass, and the imposition of compulsory services in English. Clerical celibacy, the requirement in certain religions that some all members of the clergy be unmarried. These religions consider that outside of marriage, deliberately including in sexual thoughts and behavior is sinful, requires abstention from this. Mass, central act of worship of Roman Catholic Church, culminates in celebration of the sacrament of the Eucharist. February 1553. Edward is at the age of 15. Edward fell ill. When his sickness was discovered to be terminal, he and his council drew up a device for the succession to prevent the country's return to Catholicism. Edward named his first cousin once removed, Lady Jane Grey, as is here excluding his half-sisters, Mary and Elizabeth. This decision was disputed following Edward's death, and Jane was deposed by Mary 9 days after becoming queen. During her reign, Mary reversed Edward's Protestant reforms, which became the basis of Elizabethan religious settlement of 1559. Elizabethan religious settlement. It is the name given to the religious and political arrangement made for England during the reign of Elizabeth I. Institutional corrections. Where you are correcting an individual by placing him/her in prison or jail for his treatment until he is ready for his/her reintegration into community. Penology. It is the study of punishment for crime or a criminal offenders. It includes the study of control and prevention of crime through punishment of criminal offenders. So that would be all. Thank you